Welcome back to another episode. Today's topic is loss. Loss. So, what is loss? Loss is the separation of between something, between you and something else. And so you can look at that as destruction, as ruin, but I like to look at it even more so as an inability to do what you did before. So when you have the loss of something, such as let's say you've lost maybe your favorite pair of earrings, or you lost your favorite pair of shoes, or dog, chewed up, favorite pair of slippers, or you lost money, or whatever it is, right? You have a loss. You have an inability to do something that you did before. So depending on what that is, it may not be a big deal, but in other cases, it can be devastating, right? Especially the loss of losing a loved one. So why loss? Why loss? Why would I pick a topic such as loss? Because whatever we do, whatever we're going for, there's always that hint that there could be something that we lose as a result of something that we did or something that we didn't do. It's just a kind of a necessary aspect of life is loss. So loss represents one of the 6 fears. You heard me talk about the fears between you and your ultimate success. Well, they are the 6 fears. I use the acronym FARLESS: fear of failure, abandonment, rejection, loss, the unknown, and success. And today we're dealing with the loss component. So the challenge with loss as a fear is that you fear you're going to lose something of value. So anytime there's fear involved, fear can do one of two things. It can stop you in your tracks, or it can push you forward. And it really depends on how you actually use that fear. So everyone has a fear. They have their biggest. For you, this could be the fear of loss. I don't know. But you need to have a game plan to combat it. So if the challenge is that the fear that you have will have you lose something of value, what do you do to be able to combat it and have a solution for it? Well, the way I like to look at it is you have to frame loss. And what I mean by that is you have to frame loss as an opportunity that you will miss out on for not making a decision. So you need to frame loss in such a way where you actually have control as opposed to someone else or something else. So when you look at an opportunity, look at the opportunity in regards to the decision that you can make that either gets you closer to realizing or achieving that opportunity, or it brings you, let's say, farther away, you distance yourself from it. But that's your choice, whether you bring it in or whether you push it away. And if you do that, then you put yourself in the driver's seat. And having control over that situation can bring you confidence. It can put a lot of things in place to allow you to get to where you're going. And so the other aspect to recognize with that is you always stand to lose something, whether you make a decision to bring it in or whether you make the decision to push it away. But you always stand to lose something. So if that is in fact the case, you want to identify what you're willing to lose and what you're not willing to lose. So if you bring those two components together, if you frame loss as an opportunity from not making a decision, and you actually put yourself in the driver's seat, and then you also identify what you're willing to lose and what you're not willing to lose, then you're able to combat that fear of loss, and you use it as a way to push you forward instead of holding you back. So in sharing my story, I lost my mother in 2009. And this was a very hard thing for me to take because it happened on my first Father's Day of my son, Ethan. And all I was thinking was, man, like my mother literally got to see my son one time, got to hold my son one time. And I had envisioned them growing up and kind of seeing each other and all the love and the everything that my mother instilled in me, that she would do that as a grandmother to my son. And so when I realized that wasn't going to happen anymore, that was rough. That was really rough. And to add insult to injury, I didn't even get to mourn my mother's loss for the fact that I had to deal with her estate. I had to deal with going through a process called probate. And we had a lot of issues. I had a lot of issues with my sister on how that actually was going to get done. And that took 6 years away from my life. Putting all of my energy into figuring out how my mother's final estate was going to be handled and actually doing it. 6 years. So not only do I have to deal with the loss of my mother, I had to deal with 6 years of dealing with courts and paperwork and all these things that it was not necessary, right? So that was my challenge. And again, there wasn't anything I could do about the loss of my mother. That's something that I had to accept and something I had to deal with. But I had to be able to move on from that. And then as far as going through 6 years of probate and litigation, that was a decision I decided to make. And the biggest reason that I decided to push forward with that rather than just put my hands up and give up was that I wanted to make sure that my mother's estate was handled in a proper way that she would have appreciated, because she meant that much to me. So going through those 6 years, yes, that took my time away, but I was stressing a point in doing that something needed to be done right. And so I learned a lot through that process. Like, even though 6 years is a long, long time, and I didn't think it was ever going to be over, but I learned a lot from that. The big lessons for me was that I learned that time is more important than all of that stuff. If I had to go back to it, would I have handled it differently? Yes. But I'm stronger for having gone through what I did go through. So I don't have any regrets of going through that process. But I know now that time is more important. So I actually live my life now with a sense of urgency. I don't work to wait or to think too long about anything that's going to be important and needs a decision to be made. I want to push forward with that because I don't want to miss out on an opportunity. So that's how I frame loss so that's in my control. It's either coming from a decision that I make, and coming from that decision, I'm going to lose something, but I'm going to decide where I'm going to put my energy, and identifying what I'm willing to lose and what I'm not willing to lose. So time is something that I'm not willing to waste. So that's why I have a sense of urgency and I move quickly on the things that are important to me. The next thing that I learned is how important it is to have a process for what you do. Just through everything, I learned so much about just how death is just kind of like taken in and the process that's going on with that, how the probate process works that a lot of people aren't familiar with when someone actually passes away, what you actually have to do. And with everything that I had to go through, I learned the shortcuts to not having to deal with the majority of that stuff. And there's a reason that I wanted to figure out the shortcuts. I was like, if it took me 6 years to go through all this stuff with my mother, how could that have been so much shorter, so much easier? And what I learned from that is there's something called estate planning. And estate planning puts things and organizes them and sets them up in such a way where you can avoid probate altogether. Now, the beautiful thing about avoiding probate altogether, you don't have to deal with all the courts and all the litigation and any of that. Because unlike a last will and testament, a trust can be used within estate planning so that you never have to go through the probate at all. It just bypasses that entire process. Now, I learned that if I would have had that stuff set up for my mother, when she passed away, we would not have had to go through any of that stuff. And in addition, all of the business, the family business, all that other stuff, it would have been private as opposed to public record, right? So that was huge. So believe it or not, that's one of my big missions now, is to make sure that folks that I work with are aware of what they actually need to know when it comes to estate planning. Because if you have an older parent or someone that you're caring for that's elderly and they have not set up the proper things that they need to do, it's going to create a lot of work for someone. And again, I know time is precious for not only myself, but for you as well. So that's why that's one of my other missions as well, to make sure that I share what I know and what I've learned about estate planning and what you can do to protect yourself and your family assets and everything contained within that. And then last but not least, my kids and my family. Like, I made a promise that they would not have to deal with loss and death the same way that I had to deal with it. That if someone does pass away, they should be able to grieve and to mourn and not have to worry about anything else. And then in addition to that, if someone does pass away, that there's not any craziness that happens in the court system and litigation because all the planning was already done and finalized and just put in a good place. And so that's what my promise is to my kids and my family, so they don't have to deal with what I did. So I hope this session, this episode was useful for you. I hope you learned a little bit about what you can do and preparing for the future, and look forward to catching you on the next one. Bye.